So, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, who is going to be president of the United States? Who should be president of the United States? And does it matter for those of us who don't live in the United States? I'm Dionne Jackson Miller. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay tuned. All right, look now, what an exciting few months in US politics. And I have to tell you now, I had basically stopped following US politics much for the past 8 or so years because I just couldn't bother. But as I said, the past few months have been really exciting and I'm absolutely back on board. In this video, I have 3 takeaways from what I've been seeing so far of the presidential campaign. As always, I want your takeaways, I want your comments, your thoughts, so make sure to drop them below, all right? And just a quick reminder, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel, share the video as well, because all of that helps us grow. So, after US President Joe Biden decided to step aside in the presidential campaign and then he endorsed Kamala Harris to take his place, well, all kinds of nastiness started, right? And I'm talking about things like the racism, I'm talking about things like the sexism, I was really privileged, I'm going to use that word, to be able to see Michelle Obama speak. That was on the book tour for her first book. And I mean, she's just an absolutely fantastic speaker. You've probably seen her on TV, but seeing her in person as well, trust me, just as good. Anyway, one of the things she spoke about was the kind of thing she had been subjected to while being First Lady of the United States. First Black First Lady. So she had to deal with a whole heap of racism herself. Whole heap of that was directed at her. Some of it made news. So for instance, when a government employee called her an ape in heels. So, of course, it was expected that that was going to happen with Kamala Harris as well. I mean, she is half black, she's half Indian. And by the way, I did a video on the fact that her father is Jamaican, she's of Jamaican parentage. And why I said that, despite the fact that I'm admiring her from afar, I'm not rushing to claim her, as one of us. Anyway, you can watch that video. I'll link it below and at the end of the video as well. So we saw the obvious attacks on Kamala Harris, right? People calling her a DEI hire. DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a program to promote equity in the United States, basically, or a term for programs used to promote equity in the United States. And the suggestion that was being made was that she had reached where she had reached because of racial quotas. The suggestion there is that she's not qualified for the job, she's not up to the job, she shouldn't be in that job, she was only there because she was given preferential treatment because of her color and her race. That is what the suggestion was. And yeah, that's just racism, all right? The woman is current vice president of the United States, former senator, former attorney general of California. She's a former prosecutor. In which universe would you look at somebody with those qualifications and say they're not qualified to be the president of the United States? Again, straight racism. And in the same way that racism is still a thing, sexism is still a thing as well. So it's interesting, by the way, that she is the second woman to run for the White House for one of the 2 major political parties. She's running against Trump. And of course, the first woman to do so, to represent the Democratic Party in the race for the White House, was Hillary Clinton, who also ran against Trump and, as we know, lost. So almost as soon as Biden endorsed Kamala Harris, we started to see the sexist attacks. We saw her being called a whore. We saw comments being made about how she had slipped her way to the top. And again, the underlying message there is, oh, she's a woman, she's not qualified for the position, she's not fit to be there. And the racism thing, the sexism thing, the racist attacks, the sexist attacks, they're all designed to send the same message that a woman, that a person of color can't have reached where they reached because of qualifications, because they're good at what they're doing. It has to be that, there's some underlying reason, a racial quota, sleeping with somebody else, and that they really and truly are not qualified for leadership, not qualified for the top job. And there's just so much going on in those kinds of messages, and they're designed to influence people at all kinds of different levels. Having said that, some things will change depending on who is the president. Some things, not so much. Let me use two obvious examples. The first is the issue of Gaza. Now, this is a campaign in which Vice President Harris has been repeatedly criticized for her stance on Gaza. And, as the awesomely brilliant comedian Jon Stewart pointed out, the Democrats managed to go through their entire convention dealing with a whole range of issues without having anybody on stage raising the issue of Gaza, criticizing positions on Gaza. So I listened to quite a few of the interviews that Kamala Harris did, and people are always asking her about Gaza because there's been a lot of controversy about that, and certainly listening to her answers, I didn't get the impression that there would be any significant change in course on that issue. Does there need to be a change in course? Well, October 7 marked 1 year since Hamas attacked Israel, and Amnesty International, in speaking about that, pointed out that about 1,200 people had been killed, about 250 abducted in that attack by Hamas on Israel, but that since the start of what Amnesty called an ongoing devastating Israeli onslaught on Gaza, more than 41,500 people have been killed and 1.9 million forcibly displaced in the occupied Gaza Strip. Now, her refusal to shift course on this is thought to be threatening her campaign. The Telegraph said, for instance, that the Harris campaign has serious concerns about two groups of voters, Arab Americans and young liberals. Many of those have been arguing that Ms. Harris should immediately impose an arms embargo on Israel, ending more than a year of what is being called ironclad support by the United States, and they're calling for the immediate recognition of a Palestinian state. And some have been saying if she doesn't change policy, they're not going to vote, or they'll vote for Donald Trump. They point out that Ms. Harris has met neither of these demands, and she has pledged to continue support for Israel if she wins the election while working for a ceasefire. She has said she supports a two-state solution, but hasn't given a whole lot of detail in terms of how she thinks that can be achieved. Trump, for his part, now claimed that the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas would never have happened if he were president, but also he's criticized how Israel has been handling the Gaza war. He said Israel has to do a better job of public relations, frankly, because the other side is beating them at the public relations front. He also said Israel should get it over with. He was asked whether he would support an independent Palestinian state, and his response was, "I'd have to see." So, well, you hear Trump's position there, but you also hear Harris's position. And for people who are dissatisfied with the current U.S. administration's position, they're not seeing a clear differentiation if Harris were to win the White House, and that may turn out to be a big problem for her. So another big issue, though, is the issue of climate change. And there we are likely to see a difference in terms of who wins the White House. Donald Trump, for instance, has called climate change a scam. He's called it a hoax. Kamala Harris had said it's very real. So Trump, for instance, has said that the US, if he wins, will once again exit the Paris Agreement because it's a ripoff. The Paris Agreement is a big global agreement to try to curb greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce the impact of climate change and what's happening with climate change. Now, Harris, on the other hand, has said that they've set goals for the United States and by extension the globe around when they should meet certain standards for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So who should win the White House? Well, I'm going to leave that for the people of the United States to decide, although, as I've said, there are some real consequences for the rest of the world depending on who wins. Who will win? Why, I don't know. With polls this close, the only thing I know is that I'm stocking up on popcorn. I'm Dionne. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.